I'm Gwen Farr, and we have been asked to talk a little bit about our time at First Baptist Church and how over the years and some of the things that have happened. And it made me think about a Bible verse in Psalms 122 that says, "Let us go into the house of the Lord." I was glad when they said unto us, "Let us go into the house of the Lord."
And First Baptist Church has been a blessing to us, and for the years, and we love our church family. We joined this church in 1946, and that time Brother Prince was our pastor.
Miss Beerbaum was the nursery director, and she asked me if I would work in her department. I really needed to be in a class, but I enjoyed working with the children. I grew up in a church, and my family were workers. They were very active and involved in the church. So I worked in the nursery for a while, and then I was put up in the elementary grades. I've worked with first and second grade for several years.
Over the years, we have seen pastors come and go, and we have seen good times, and sometimes not so good have been for the church.
I remember when they had to put folding chairs in the aisles of the sanctuary to accommodate all the people that came for the Sunday worship service.
And our children were born and raised in the First Baptist Church and baptized in the First Baptist Church.
And there were many faithful teachers that for the children and the teenagers, and they also had social activities to help keep the children in a safe environment.
We have not agreed with all the aims of the church to solve the problems and the business of the church, but we have especially that has been voted on or to be voted on, and but we went along with the major decisions it was voted on, and we just even though we may not have voted for it, we worked to do what was right and keep the things going that the church wanted.
And I remember when the roof and the ceiling in the sanctuary were in need of repairs, and we had to have Sunday services in the basement for a while.
And Dr. Johnson asked several of us to go to early church because he needed to give more room for the 11 o'clock services. And even though people then weren't used to going to early church, and very few attended the early church, and they had to be asked.
The sanctuary was beautiful after they had finished all the repairs and painted it, and we had new chandeliers and pew cushions and carpets.
When we look back at the beautiful colored glass windows, you know that some people had a vision of what a haven this church could be through the years.
We were excited whenever the parsonage was demolished and the children's building was completed. We really needed it, and it was soon filled with children, and at that time, we had enough children to, in the elementary, to have a grade in each classroom. And some of those children are grown up now, and they're helpers in our church and in our community, and some of them are even grandparents.
I was church treasurer for 16 years, and during that time I was also on the Budget and Finance Committee, but now I serve as a backup to the treasurer.
Our church has been very fortunate to have talented musicians. I think music is a vital part of a worship service.
Our MMC building has been in the planning for years before it was really a reality, and we needed people to make up their mind that they were willing to give to the church, and those that could give frequently to reduce the debt.
Our building is a beautiful facility now, and it's used for many activities. On Wednesday evening, it is filled with a lot of children, and some of the children, the only time they get to learn Bible verses or hear about God's love is at the Awana time. And then the building was used, the Red Cross used it to feed and shelter people during the ice storm from all over the county. And we've had some beautiful wedding receptions there. And we've had some big church dinners too that people enjoyed, where so many came and enjoyed eating together. And I just hope that our members will keep bringing their love offerings, and someday we'll have this building all paid for.
We're also proud of our youth in this church. They seem to be willing to do any problem that comes up or any program that comes up, and that way they'll grow up knowing how to receive do their responsibilities when they are adults.
And they're especially nice to the senior members. We know because we're part of that group.
Yes. We are a church that we react and talk to our church members and try to encourage them, and also we do the same to our community people.
Our purpose is knowing Jesus and making him known.
This church has been a blessing to us in many ways.
We just pray that we will be able to attend and work in this church as long as we live. It's a joy and a privilege to be a part of God's people here at First Baptist Church.
Hello, I'm Jerry Smalling, and I want to talk to you for a few minutes about how we came to be in Paragould and what a wonderful relationship we have in our church. We came up from Warren in 1965 because my husband took over the job of principal of Paragould High School, and our 4 sons came with us. There was John, was in the 7th grade. Tom was a sophomore in high school. Bob was a senior in high school, and Dennis was a sophomore at Monticello A&M, which now is University of Arkansas at Monticello. We all happened on a Wednesday noon right after we got through eating, and just sitting there, and the phone rang, and it was Orville Roberts from Paragould. Now, Orville and Sam had been in World War II and had returned back to Ouachita to finish their college careers, and played basketball together and were good friends. And Orville was superintendent up here, and he said, "Sam, I need a principal. How about getting in your car and getting up here?" And Sam said, "Well, I'll come tomorrow." He said, "No, come today." So Sam left and came back on Thursday. He said, "What would you think about moving to Paragould?" And I thought for a minute, and I'd never heard of Paragould. I knew it had to be someplace up close to the Missouri line, because our kids, our 4 boys, were on the swim team at the YMCA, and in the summertime they would drive from Warren to Jonesboro to the swim meets, and they'd have to leave at 5:30 in the morning in order to get to that place. And I knew it must be up close to the Missouri line, but I always said if we ever moved anyplace else, I would rather move north than south, because humidity too high in the south. Anyway, I said, "Well, if that's where you think we need to be, and that's where the opportunity is for you, then we'll go." And he said, "Well," so all day Friday and all day Saturday he was very quiet, very pensive, didn't say very much. So Sunday morning when we started to go to church, he taught 9-year-old boys in the junior department, and his friend Floyd Richardson taught 10-year-old boys, but they were really good friends, and Sam had his children in school. So I said, "Sam, listen this morning, talk to Floyd, and then listen to the sermon, and anything that touches you with the idea of this is going to help you make a decision." So he said, "Okay." Well, we came in from church, and he whistled when he came up the back step. Sam only whistled when he made closures about things or made decisions. It would look like something just went off his shoulders. And he said, "We're going to Paragould." That was on Sunday. On Monday, we left for Maine. We went every other year to Maine to visit our Yankee kinfolks, and so the grandparents could see their kids and so forth. And when we came back, people couldn't figure out why we were going to leave, but we did anyway. And we came up here on August the 16th, and it was Sam's birthday. And then the following Sunday, the First Baptist Church had a revival, and I don't remember who the preacher was, but all of us joined First Baptist Church on Labor Day in September of 1965. They said it was unusual that there were that many stair steps that came down the aisle, all 6 of us. Anyway, we asked Ed Claybrook when we shook his hand if we had a place of service, because we'd been serving all this time before. We couldn't see any reason why we couldn't now. So he said he'd never had too many people shake his hand and offer to go to work. And so we've been here since 1965. It's been a wonderful, wonderful relationship. This is the greatest church family ever, anywhere. I'm like the little lady that does the commercial, that it's the best place anywhere. The people in this church are friendly, they are kind, they care about each other, they visit with each other, they socialize together, and if you ever get in trouble of any kind, whether it's a death in the family or anything, they're there. Not only are they there at the time that it happens, but they come back to encourage you and let you know that they're there anytime you need them. It is a great, great church family. I would encourage any of you that are listening to me right now, if you do not have a church home, and you need to move your letter and get yourself lined up with the Lord, this is the place to do it. We welcome you with open arms. So just come and see us. There's always room for one more. Thank you.
I'm Lillian Pittman, and I came to this church in 1960, in the middle of the year. I moved in on the corner of 10th and Locust Street, and I was there so lonesome because I didn't know anyone in town. And I had gone to the grocery store, and I came home, and this lady down on the corner was mowing her yard. She was not using a power mower. She was not using a self-propel, or she was using one of those antique kind, the one that you just push. And I thought, oh, that poor lady is so hot, and she's down there mowing the yard. And then, in about an hour or two, there was a car pulled up in front of my house, and this lady got out, and I thought, oh, she's probably wanting to mow my yard. And she's out mowing yards for people. And she came to the door, and she said, I noticed you have some children here that's been out playing, and said, I go to the First Baptist Church, and I wanted to invite you. Said, we have a good program for children, and I'm going now to WMU, and said, I just want to invite you to church. And I thought, that lady, she took time out of mowing her yards for people and come to invite me. Did I not know? A few years later, I learned she probably owned half Green County. She did not mow yards for other people. She only mowed her own, and she used a push mower, which is an antique now. Probably no one knows what they look like unless you go to a museum somewhere. But that's why I came to First Baptist Church, just because she stopped and invited me and told me that they had a place for my children. And so here I came with my 3 to church, and then later, they asked me if I would work and help teach kindergarten. That the lady was moving that was working in it. And I said, okay, I will try. And so I came up here for half a day. And I also had a daughter that was coming to kindergarten at the time. And I started up here with her. And the next year, Jean Landrum took over. And Anita Rogers and we started with kindergarten. We had a formal program that would probably say would be sanctified by the state, because she was a registered teacher, and so she could get our supplies and all that. But we had 30 children every year for the time I worked, and I worked for 10 years. And we had that many children in kindergarten every year. And one of the most memorable times in kindergarten was when we took them to the Memphis Zoo. We borrowed a bus from the high school, which at that time they probably only had 2 buses. And we borrowed one of them, or rented one of them, and we got Brother Carol Gibson to drive for us. And we get across the bridge, and he said, we've got problems. I have no brakes. And we were on the bus with 30 children to the zoo by ourselves, us 3 teachers. And we get to the service station, and to get into the zoo, we could get in free if we got there before noon. And it's about 10 o'clock, 10:30, and we get to the service station, and the man said, well, I can take my car and I can start driving them to the zoo while they work on your bus. So we can get in the gate before noon if we'll hurry. So we load up the car with as many children as we could, and he'd make a trip to the zoo. Of course, one of us would go and stay with the ones that were there. And then The other one did stay back at the service station, and then he'd go back and pick up enough. And we did get into the zoo. I think we only had to pay for 3 people, which if we had to pay for 30 people, we wouldn't have had enough money. But we got to the zoo, and Mr. Gibson stayed at the service station to get the brakes fixed. And of course, we call every once in a while to see if they were ready. No, they're not ready, but they're working on it. And at noon, we go out into the park. We've looked at the zoo, we've done all everything, and we had our lunch. We had taken our lunch. So we got out into the park area, thinking they would be there in an hour or two, and we'd been playing the park and everything. Well, it got to be 3 o'clock, no bus. 4 o'clock, and no bus. And 5 o'clock, no bus. So what are we gonna do for supper? We had 30 hungry children. So we got to looking to see if we could find some place that would deliver supper. So Kentucky Fried Chicken said they would deliver our supper if she would come and get it. So she calls a cab and goes to Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they deliver us supper. So in the meantime, we called back to the church, and they'd gone out to the armory and got a bus, and they were on their way to Memphis to pick us up. Well, they come with a bus. It was ready to come home. But we had to wait for the bus to get there because we had no cell phones. We couldn't call them and tell them that we were on our way home. We had to wait till they got there so they would know where we were at. And at 11 o'clock that night, we drove in the parking lot. And the parking lot here was full of people because they wanted to see what the 3 adults looked like, not what the 30 children looked like. But that was fun. It was fun. And then we got our new building built over here, which is open now, and they're fixing to redo it, the educational building. This is later. I'm working with the primary department. Bible school came around. Oh boy. When they built the building, Mrs. James was on the committee. She asked them, she said, "You are putting sinks in those rooms, aren't you?" And the men that designed the building said, "Sinks? Why do you need sinks in the Sunday school rooms?" Well, these are primary children, and you're always going to paint or you're always going to do something that you need to wash your hands. Okay, so they built us some sinks in there in the corner. And Bible school came around. I thought, oh boy, we're going to go in their new rooms, and we'll have all this. And in my plans that year was to build a relief map. And it said that sawdust and wallpaper paste would make a great map. You could take that, mix it together, and put it on a board, and you could do mountains and valleys and all this. So I get my husband, he goes to the sawmill and gets me sawdust. And I get wallpaper paste, and we make the best map, and we all washed our hands in that sink. And the next day or two, my husband came home and he said, "Guess what? I ate lunch with a plumber today." He said, some crazy woman up at that First Baptist Church decided that she'd wash her hands with sawdust and wallpaper paste on it, and said she's nearly ruined the plumbing. So that's another good story that I can remember. I'm afraid to tell that I may still have to pay a plumbing bill. My husband said, I didn't say a word. Said he didn't know that it was my wife he was talking about. He remembered getting the sawdust. But anyway, that's fun, and we always had fun in our Sunday school class and everything. The family of this church, and that's what I call them, my family. In the sad times of my life, they've been there for me. Anytime that sad things happened to me, and they did, they were there. I can't say anything that bad about any of these people in this church. Just good things. They are my family.
I'm Bonnie Maxwell from First Baptist Church. I have been a member of First Baptist Church for 74 years. I've attended longer than that. I attended my whole life. My mother and daddy brought me to church when I was a baby. But I was saved when I was 9 years old. We had a revival, and at that time, when we had a revival, the junior and intermediate young people would come up into the auditorium during Sunday school period and have evangelistic service. And it was at that time that I was saved. Our leaders in the junior department had been talking to us about it time, because they knew our age, and then that was usually when a lot of them was during the revival. But after we were saved, of course, we all wanted to be baptized as soon as possible, and I'm not sure where it was that morning or the next Sunday, that night or the next Sunday. And we were baptized in the old baptistry, which most of y'all don't even remember about, but it was over where the organ is now. And when we got ready to go in, though, our pastor, Brother Williamson, said, and now, I know all of y'all, but I might get you mixed up, because there's so many of us girls that look so much alike, and about the same size. So he gave us a little white card with our name on it, and we were baptized, and he got all of our names right. But then one of the next things I remember is I was in Sunbeams, and I loved Sunbeams. And one reason we all like Sunbeams, Miss Haynes was our school teacher, and she was our leader in Sunbeams. And we would all walk from Woodrow Wilson School down to the church to have our Sunbeams. And I think that was a start of my liking and being so interested in missions ever since then, because then I went on into GAs and the other missions, and then we had a young women's, mostly mothers, of WMU that met at night, so that we could get our husbands to stay with our babies. One thing I do remember, though, is when they changed the organ, because I thought it was so obvious, because we had always had the organ behind the pulpit, and Pauline led the music, but we had somebody from the congregation that always lead the congregational music, and the only ones I can remember was Max Gregory and Harry J. Hooker, but we had different ones at different times. Then another thing that I had forgotten about till Jean Lamb reminded me, that was we had a ladies' parlor, because we didn't have anything like a lounge or anything, and it's still there, but we don't use it. It's behind the balcony, and it's the same floor level as the balcony, and it has a fireplace in it, and there's we would have showers and little parties and there, but it was also our Sunday school class meeting place. But then thinking we'd move on up to when our kids was in vacation Bible school, and when they had vacation Bible school, we had it for 2 whole weeks. It all morning for 10 days, and it was a lot like it is today, but the kids went till they were 14, 16 years old, and they didn't go as a helper. They went to have their own lesson and all, and we had a group that would always come in, but we didn't have fancy refreshments either. They had Kool-Aid and cookies, and that was what they had always and expected. That was what was expected. Then another thing that we had for the children was Crowley's Ridge Bible Camp. It would be out at the Walcott, and they would rent the 2 dormitories and the kitchen, and it would be like any other camp. Our church, it was just for our food, and women from the church would go out and cook for them every day. I remember my mother would always get up at 5 o'clock and go, and she didn't cook all the meals, but there was different ones that had different times, and they did that. But then our youth, we had quite a few things for our youth, but it all had to be, we didn't have a paid youth director, and so it was us parents that did that. And we had different things, but one thing about it, we had lots of parents, unlike today, we have lots of youth that their parents don't come, but at that time, almost all the youth's parents come, so we had lots of parents that have different activities for them. Then we get on to some of my favorite things. That's what the senior citizens we did. This has happened in the last 5 years. It started in the latter part of the year 89 and 90, and we had a bus at that time, which we always do, but we had one old bus, old blue, that everybody knew about. And when we went on a trip like that, we didn't know where we was gonna get back or not. Our drivers had to be mechanics as well as drivers. And the three main trips that we made was we went to the Chautauqua in Wisconsin, and then in New Mexico, and then we went to Ridgecrest one year. And the members that went, we paid for our own, we had all of our own expense, and we even bought the gas that was used in the bus. And then we had some fun trips too. We went to Branson about every year, and we go there and stay usually 2 nights. And one of the last trips we went was Miss Helen and Stella Stewart wanted to go so bad, but they were in such bad health, and Miss Haynes was the same way. And they talked to us about it. We say, now, we'll go whenever y'all can go. We'll get together. And finally, they decided that, and it was worth the trip up there. Oh, they had such a good time, and we did too. But all during the time of all this time, we had a lot of little trips, day trips. We went to the outlet. It was mostly women, so we would go to the outlet malls. And we went to the mall in Memphis. I have got a real good picture of Sam and Jerry Smalling. He drove that day down there. Most of the time, Willis Maxwell and L.V. Mitchell did there. But you know, but there's one thing I missed that I wanted to tell about. When the baptistry, you know, the water has to be heated. And when we were in charge of the baptistry, me and my husband, we had to light the furnace, little furnace downstairs. And so we had to ride the elevator, which down into the hole that wasn't much bigger than for us. And I say we because I wouldn't let him go by himself. I said, and something happened, it just happened to both of us. And that was something we dreaded, but it was kind of funny too. But, you know, the church has really meant a whole lot to me through the years. I told my doctor one time when I had been sick, I said, well, you better get me well. I think First Baptist Church is tired of feeding me. Because our church is so good about that. I've had several sicknesses that, you know, I tell my Sunday school class every morning, every Sunday morning almost, what do people do that are not Christians and have Christian friends to look after them when they need them? And not only, but you had all your good fellowship too. And I had 2 deaths, my mother and my daddy. And while in that period of time, my daddy died when he was rather young in '58. That was when Brother James Yates was pastor. But my mother didn't die till in 1989, and when Brother Clay Sample was here. But that is a time when you really appreciate and know how much the church means to you. And next to your salvation, your friends that you have in church, it's very, very important. I'm Bonnie Maxwell. I shared with you earlier some of my memories of the church, but today I'm going to have a few more that are probably earlier memories. These are some of my very earliest ones. When I was a child, probably about 6 or 7 years old, I used to always come with my mother to prayer meeting. And at that time, we was in the old building, and we always met down where the old fellowship hall is now. And I remember so well in the wintertime that it was always so hot or so cold, but the building was heated by, that room was by a big pot-bellied stove. You sat real close to it, you burned up. You sat too far away from it, you froze. But still, it was a wonderful time. Then along that line, the use of that building, I can't remember the exact time, but it was in the 1930s or 40s that we had the floods over at Bard and over in there, the rivers all, and we had that part of the church full of people. It wasn't like it was before, because they had facilities over there when the ice storm come, but we didn't have anything down there. And my mother would come and help every day to feed them and everything, and I kept wanting to come with her, and she said, oh, there's no place for you, but I begged her into letting me come one day. And it just amazed me, just all over the floors, there was pallets, because we didn't even have enough chairs for her. But, as always, First Baptist Church come to the rescue. Other things that I remember about when I was little, all this when I was less than 10 years old. I would go with my mother out, and it was called, we wouldn't say it today, but it was a poor farm, and it was out north of town, and it was a poor farm. It was, back then, there wasn't any Social Security or anything, and so if you didn't have any kinfolks you could live with there, you were. So they had this place that the county did provide, and it usually had from 6 to 8 people out there. They were, most of them mentally and physically disabled, but they weren't in the wheelchairs or anything. They had to be able to take care of themselves. And I loved to go with my mother out there, because we had one of the ladies out there, she had the mentality of a child, and she had more dolls and things like that, and that was just right down my alley, so I really enjoyed that. But you know that we have continued right along in there. By the time that was gone, we had Green Acres, and we always had services at Green Acres. My husband worked out there for about 40 years. I mean, had Sunday school and church. And then, of course, when we had the other places, I said he was at Green Acres, but he was at Paragould Nursing Center. But we've had services at those two places, and then when at Sunshine Manor, we have services out there. And it's something that we enjoy being able to do for them, and it's something that they really look forward to. Then, when I was still a child, we used to have big revivals in the summer. It lasted a week or 2 weeks, and I had huge crowds. And the wonderful part about it, there was always a lot of people saved. But what I remember, as a kid, you don't always remember the most important thing. I remember that we'd have services in the morning, and then the visiting preacher and our preacher and the music people would all go home with somebody for the meal, because of course they knew ahead of time. And my mother was always willing to cook for them. So when I was smaller, I guess to keep me out of the kitchen, she would always let me sit in with the preacher and then the singer and my daddy and all, and talk. And I remember things from that was wonderful. They talked about their church and what their church had done and what their plans was and all. And even though I was a little girl, I thought, well, that's wonderful, the plans and things that we all look forward to. We all have things that we enjoy and remember. I've never been very good at remembering dates, but none of these have made any difference about dates anyway, because that's just things that happen. Then another thing that I remember this was also back then, it was during the Depression, that money was scarce, and it was scarce in churches too. So even some churches I know had to close, because in our church, I don't really remember that, but I think about all the money that we tried to have was enough to pay our pastor and to pay the utilities. And outside of that, it just had to go. But I remember one Sunday afternoon, one of the members of the church, and I don't know who it was, of course I didn't, they come to our house, brought their card to see it for us to pledge what we would give either by the week or by the month or by the year. And I know my daddy was kind of hesitant. He said, well, we really don't know what this is going to bring. And if we pledge anything, it's to the church or it's to the Lord, and I don't know. And I honestly don't remember where they did make their pledge, but I don't remember if it was that afternoon or not. But then another thing that happened, well, it's more modern, but when the fire station was across the street, of course there wasn't cell phones, there was still phones, and we had a phone in the back of the auditorium, and it was to be used only for fires, and we had during that time, different times we've had doctors, and so there was always an usher that would be back there, and when the telephone rang, that they would answer it, and when the telephone rang, and then he started to the choir, we knew it was Russell Walden, because he was a volunteer fireman, and then about that time, we heard the fire truck. And I said, after all that happened, you kind of had to settle down to have the rest of the church. But it didn't happen very often. But that was something that did, In modern times, that's all changed. And of course, nowadays, we have paid firemen there all the time, but at that time, there wasn't anybody but the driver that was right, and all the others had to be that, but another thing that we did, was, we always had a big musical program at Christmas. And we weren't the only one. The Methodist Church did, and it wasn't in competition with each other in a way. It was, but really, people would say, well, I want to go to their church and see that. And I want to go to their church. And a lot of them were not members of either church, but it was quite a production, both places. So they worked it out, but they never had them at the same time. They would either have one on Sunday afternoon, one on Sunday night, or one on Saturday night, or make the arrangements for people. And I mean, we would have the auditorium full at both places. And it was a dressed up affair too. I always thought that was, you know, back then women wore hats and things like that. But it was a beautiful thing that we had every year. And I don't know when it was discontinued that they would quit having it on different times. But they did that for years, so everybody could. There's lots and lots of other good memories, but those are just a few of the ones that happened a long time ago. We've had a lot of good new memories, but I think you've already been hearing a lot of the others through the mornings, and I hope you enjoyed them and realized what a wonderful thing First Baptist Church, the influence it has had on this town. And through the years, it's always been right there when they were needed. And now, though, I'm fixing to leave you.
This is Arthur Kelly, and good morning to all of you. Ralph and I joined First Baptist Church in 1946 in August, and we had hardly got settled when Miss Vivian Hollis came to visit with us and asked us to come to the First Baptist Church. And we told her that the first Sunday that came around that we would be there, and we were. And after the services were over, we were most surprised when the couple that had joined with us, Mr. and Mrs. Bill Bronner from Memphis, she turned to me and said, "Are you Arthur Carpenter?" That was my maiden name, and I said yes. Well, she was a long-lost cousin, and I thought it was a coincidence that we would both join the church that same day. And they were here for several years, and Billy was very active, and Bill was too in church. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the building. When I first came, Brother M.E. Prince was the pastor, and his wife had passed away just shortly before we came. And where the children's unit is now was the parsonage. And that same alley that would go up and down there today is still there, which was very bad when it cut into the parsonage yard, you know. And neither did we have the chapel. That part of the building hadn't developed yet. So in the early years here, I worked in the primary department for quite a few years, and Ralph worked in the junior department. And finally, he just got too busy and he had to give his up. But I kept on with mine for quite a few years. And from there, I went into an adult women's class. And I enjoyed it very much. I've been with children almost too long by that time. And we had good attendance. We had Bible school for 2 weeks in a row, and we would have a revival. It would be 2 weeks too. And then in 1972, I became the church clerk and the and the clerk of the county. And I was in the office with Dr. C.A. Johnson and Hester Fitzgerald, who was the financial secretary. And I was very fond of Hester. She was the most pleasant person to work with, and she was a lot of fun also. But we did a lot of remodeling during that time. We started in with doing the lounge upstairs and the small kitchen that evolved there. And that took a lot of time and a lot of effort. We were trying to make it as attractive as possible. But one afternoon, the man was putting up the paper on one wall, and I recognized it as some of the most expensive paper that we had. And I was remarking how beautiful it looked. Well, the next morning, I came in and walked through the lounge and into the little kitchen to make coffee. And I thought something is wrong in the lounge, and I don't know what it is. But I walked back, and all the paper had fallen off in the floor. And so that was an amusing thing that happened. Also, while I was in the office, Jerry Fugate was our music director, and Pauline Highsmith was the pianist. And we had a visiting singer for a revival who also was an opera singer. And while we were in the auditorium looking around, he remarked that he had a tone in his voice that would make the windows shake. And Jerry was young and impulsive, and he said, "Oh, let's see you do it." And he made the windows shake, and then Jerry and I were shaking because he was afraid he was going to break them. At that time, we had the windows all enclosed with glass, where they had just been open to the air. And then we remodeled the office, and that was a nightmare because we had to move over to the children's department and just do the best we could. And during that time, we had a flood here in Paragould, and our kindergarten children had gone to Memphis on an outing. And their parents began to call just frantic. But we managed to find out where they were and how they were coming along, and they all got home safely. And in the meantime, Hester and I were grabbing towels out of the baptistry and putting in the windows in the auditorium because some of them were leaking. And there was just many things that we had that we enjoyed together. I finally did some adult teaching of ladies' classes. We had one lady that had a heart attack, and she was out for a year, and I kept her class. And then when Esther Thompson became ill, I kept her class for a year. And I always substituted anywhere that I was needed. Not that I felt like that I was so able, but I just wanted everything to go well. And so there have been many, many changes. And I miss a lot of the people that I used to know in the church that are still living. And I wish some of them would speak up because they've been there longer than I have. I know somebody has been there for 74 years, but we've been there 64 years. So I'll bid you good morning, and it's nice talking to you.
I'm